Welcome to Love to Hate Watch. This is a podcast where we discuss movies, TV shows, and other pop culture that is compelling, but usually in the worst way possible. Me and my co-host Vicky Stone will discuss the subject matter and come to the conclusion whether it is love, love to hate, or just hate. Come join us as we try to find redeeming qualities in whatever we have subjected ourselves to watching.
Yes.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and really, Vicky, this was obviously the decline of the series. I was watching it going, oh man, I mean, there was
it really wasn't.
Larry Fishburne, thumbs up, Larry Fishburne.
Okay, so I was going to say, actually, there's a few kind of like, we seem to have repeat players in all of our works that we're watching at the moment. I mean, Larry Fishburne is Lawrence Fishburne, who's been in like at least one of the things that we've watched.
Did he go with that name? Did he think
I think that was the beginning.
Was the name to go with?
Well, I think maybe because that would have been sort of like when he was in sort of Spike Lee's sort of stuff. I think was he in Boys in the Hood? Or no, he was in the other one. What was it? Do the Right Thing?
No, he was in
he's the father in one of
now. He was in a Vietnam movie, and he was playing a young private. I think that was his first movie.
Yeah, but he was definitely in
Fishburne.
Definitely in a Spike Lee as the father of Cuba Gooding Jr. I'm sure of it. Like he's definitely in that. But I always thought he was always Lawrence Fishburne, but maybe in the beginning when he thought he was because he is a young thing in this with the love beads and the sort of like he's the nicest character in the whole of the movie. He's the one that he kind of gets what I did think,
although he does get someone killed, I'd like to add.
He does. But what I would say is he has more lines in this movie as a kind of like third string player than he ever did in The Mule as the DEA operative, because he had about 2 lines in that. So I was like, well, and that's when he was a big famous, well-established star. So I apologize in advance because I watched this a while back and I thought, oh, it's really good. And as I watched it again this week for our podcast, I was like, yeah, it's not quite as good as I remember. Plus, another one of our kind of like the people that seem to pop up in lots of movies I'm watching at the moment is Patricia Arquette. Now, Patricia Arquette is the main like final girl, if you will, in Dream Warriors, and she kind of like has. And I think one of my favourite films is True Romance with her and Christian Slater, which is like from years ago. And if you've never seen it, Gary Oldman as a Rastafarian drug-dealing evil pig is the funniest thing you've ever seen. Trying to do patois as he gets killed. But she always in that movie when she has that, if you've seen it, there's a big scene with her and James Gandolfini. And he tries to kill her because she's run away from the bad Drax, and then she kills him. But she screams throughout it, and I always used to think I really like Patricia Arquette, but her scream is really annoying. It's like it's like a baby crying. It's really strange. And I remember I kind of as I watched this, I was like, this is where this is going to be getting really, really annoying because it's the constant like pitch of all the movie. It actually starts with her. Interesting trivia before we get going into the actual movie. I sort of had a little dig around because I've obviously you recognise Lawrence Fishburne's in it, Patricia Arquette, and the main kind of girl who's part of it was Nancy in the original, so she's back. Nancy's back to kind of fight Freddie again. But I had a look and I thought, I wonder who directed this. Was it Wes Craven who wrote the original and directed the original? And it turned out it wasn't him, but he did this one. He'd never intended Nightmare on Elm Street to be any kind of a franchise. It was supposed to be like a one-off, and that was it. Because Wes Craven's like quite a well-respected director, directed lots of interesting movies and written lots of interesting movies. So he wasn't involved in the second one, and the second one is awful. So this is a kind of return to form. I know you might laugh, but so he wrote an original treatment for this. So he said, oh, well, if it's going to be a franchise, let's bring it to a close in this one. So he basically said, I'll write it and sort of bring it to a close. Please, let's bring it to a close. Clearly, that didn't happen. He did write the original treatment. The film as filmed wasn't exactly what he wrote. I think they changed it. I think it was that couple of script doctors and stuff came in. And then obviously it went on ad infinitum. I think there's been about sort of 6 movies with like Nightmare on Elm Street, and then there's obviously the reboots and things that weren't involving anybody from the original. But the director of the movie, I thought, oh, who did direct it? So it's Chuck Russell, right? And I was like, oh, and it always makes me laugh to see what else they've directed. And we talked about this the other week when we were discussing, the guy who's the director of the previous, who directed Das Boot and all that. Anyway, so I thought this is good for you because it was one of your favourite movies. He actually, Chuck Russell, who directed this, directed The Mask with Jim Carrey. There you go.
Actually,
does that make sense to you?
That still holds up.
Which is a great movie.
No, that does. Yes, I would agree. And
so
Cameron Diaz probably at her peak, potentially.
Oh, poor Cameron. She's still at her peak. I think she's retired from movie making now. But he also directed The Blob, which kind of figures when you look at the special effects in the movie. It kind of goes with and The Scorpion King with The Rock. And Eraser.
That was not so.
It wasn't good, but what I'm saying is
Eraser. I quite like Eraser.
Eraser, yeah. So that was that. Those were his kind of notable films. But just to say, at one point they didn't direct it. It didn't cost a lot of money. This movie, not in real terms, nowadays, like not in comparison. But at the time of this coming out, it was the highest grossing independent film ever made. Can you believe that? Well, you can because it's an independent new one.
I actually think that the effects are quite good. There's only one or two that are particularly poor. There's one of I think it's one of the first deaths that I was like, oh yeah, that doesn't quite hold up. But
no, most of them are very good.
Stop motion stuff. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
For what they could do at that time, I thought it still is believable, or you've got to use your imagination a little bit, but still quite good.
I think the best thing about
there's some weird things. I mean, when I saw Zaza Gabor as one of the title people, I thought, what is this going to be? But obviously she only plays a very small part in the movie.
I taking it that you basically came into this blind? You'd never seen this before?
So I did, as part of the movie, because I was completely blind.
Did you watch the first one? Yeah. Yes.
No, I've not seen anything. If you can read it, I did all the names and I predicted when they would die and whether they would live. So
did you get it right?
I said right.
It's like a sweepstakes.
Wasn't even close. Albeit, I got close on the first couple of deaths. I got close.
You knew it was coming. There was a few foreshadowings. Yeah, there was a few foreshadowings. But
yeah.
But yeah, so I apologise. As I watched it, I thought, oh, Chris will be hating this, because I just thought it wasn't quite as good as. But I put it this way, right? Going back to being a kid, out of all of the movie horror kind of iconic kind of figures, Freddy Krueger was always the one that petrified me the most, because I didn't watch a Nightmare on Elm Street movie of any kind until, I watched a little bit of one. In fact, this has a link to you, because it was the same family of people who introduced this to me. So you were frightened of American Werewolf in London because you watched a part of the metamorphosis scene when you were about 5, because of Tony Chance, if you remember, who was my family friend, who was babysitting us at the time. And I actually watched a little snippet of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, I think it is, with Cara, his daughter, when she was babysitting me when I was about 10, which traumatized me and made me not ever want to watch a Freddy Krueger movie. So I only got into Nightmare on Elm Street late. I was like really late, probably when I was like an older teenager, because I'd been so put off of it when I was younger. So how do you feel about, just interestingly, how do you feel about American Werewolf in London now? Can you watch it? I love it.
Fine, yeah. Look, I mean, basically, all of these movies, and this one included, probably what would have really freaked me out when I was, 8, 9, 10, whatever. Watching it as an adult, it's quite funny. It's quite funny. Good, you appreciate
the dreams thing,
the effects, and you're like, oh, it's quite good effects, but yeah, there's nothing that's particularly chilling
No.
or anything along those lines. So they're definitely ones that when you're younger, there is the kind of psychological thing that kind of freaks you out a little bit. I mean, American Werewolf in London is incredible effect. So, but when you're younger, you don't realize.
No, it's not. You don't appreciate the style and the talent of people. It's more about whether it freaks you out. But I think with Freddie, I think it's the same kind of thing. I think as an adult, you can appreciate the special effects and the kind of the attempt at humor in places, which it got kind of a bit more kind of like slapsticky, I think, towards like the later, kind of parts of the franchise. So this is kind of like is gearing up for that. You can see he kind of became almost like a benign figure that children liked in the end. He was on lunchboxes and like you bought dolls of him and stuff. Like, I mean, this was a little bit before my time, but like that was the thing in America. They see him very differently. He was like a wisecracking character that murders you in your dreams, which is a weird. That was the thing that got me. It was the dreams thing. Like you fall asleep and you couldn't escape no matter what because everyone's got to go to sleep at some point. And I think that was the thing. And also the thing that they do really well, I think, throughout all of the movies is always the kind of psych out. Like you think, oh, they're awake. Oh no, they're not awake. Oh, they're still in the dream. I still think they did that in a couple of places. They still did that quite well, although there was a few obvious bits which we'll talk about in a bit, which you were like, yeah, you're definitely still in the dream, buddy.
Well, let's get off, into it. I think first of all, the title "Dream Warriors" is stretching it a little bit. I mean, they only really warrior up in the dreams at the very last 10 minutes. So
it's like
we're talking.
They talk about them getting like magical powers in the dreams very late on, and then they don't really use it other than a couple of times. There's the guy, the kind of
the wizard.
That didn't go well. And then there's like the guy with extra strength, and then there's but the rest of them didn't seem to really be able to do anything. I'm thinking, oh no, sorry, the boy who can't speak. The boy can't speak.
Patricia Arquette could do
gymnastics, and the boy he can't speak. He goes no at one point, and that's like it hurts Freddie. So that right. So it starts with Patricia Arquette. And I just we start with a very creepy looking crafting. So she's frantically making a doll's house out of kind of like lollipop sticks. And you're like, whoa, what's this? This is a bit odd. And it turns out.
What was it? Was it like plaster of Paris or paper mache? What was she actually doing?
It was paper mache, like, building it with cardboard and then strengthening it with like
PVA or
PVA glue. Yeah. Well, I think it was plaster of Paris. It was powder. But then she was drinking stuff. You get the feeling at this point she's trying to stay awake, and you're like, oh, okay, so she's clearly got problems. And as usual with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises, the parents are all fucking bums, and like they're always out drinking and like fucking bringing a man back, shut the fuck up, So the mother comes in this kind of very 80s like pleather PVC style fuchsia cocktail dress, and you're like. And she's like, oh, you need to get to bed. Why are you still up? And she's like, I was waiting for you. And clearly she's like, you need to get to bed because I've got a man downstairs and we're going to have some action. So you need to go to bed. Also, the house at that point looks very kind of like, not scuzzy is the wrong word, but it doesn't look, when later on in the movie, there's a whole bit down the stairs when Nancy comes to meet the mother. And it looks like a bloody mansion. But when you first see the movie, it looks like it's going to be like a kind of very kind of down at home house, which I find a bit odd later on. But anyway, must make sense.
Being quite fresh or fresh-ish in terms of the franchise knowledge of particularly 1 and 2, I know kind of the pop culture around Freddy Krueger and stuff. But in the end of 2, did they not kill him off? Was there a cliffhanger at the end of 2 that basically he was still alive? Everyone was fully knowledge of he's going to come back.
The thing is,
because there's no kind of like, oh my god, he's back. You're right. When the main
2 is odd
first one
because
back,
2 no. If I'm right, if I'm thinking correctly, 2 is about he possesses a boy, like a teenager, and like he gets him to do kind of like bad things. So it's almost as though he's sort of slightly weakened. And he's sort of like having to act through, and so the boy keeps like waking up and he's done terrible things, but it's not really him because it's Freddie that's doing it. And if I remember correctly, that's the second one. Freddie's dead. Oh no, Freddie's back or something, I think is the second one. But yeah, so the third one is third one's that one, and then there's like Freddie's dead. There's one where he tries to have a baby with. I've never seen that one. He wants to carry on his legacy lineage, and then there's one where there's about 6 of them. I think there's like Freddie's. There's this up to 3, and then there's like 4 is Freddie's the baby, the dream child or something. I think it's called. Then there's Freddie's dead, and then there's the new nightmare. I think there's that. But it's a lot. But then he's in other things as well. He's in the funniest one, if you ever want to watch it, and it is funny as hell, is Jason versus Freddy. That is hilarious. That is really good. Actually, that is, I mean, I say this now, but that was good. I quite enjoyed it because it's a whole thing where they're competing for kills and they're competing to kill the people, and yeah, it's quite good.
But it's just, obviously, it's a vehicle to get to the mental hospital or the institute with all the other kids who are the other Dream Warriors who are being affected. But it's really weird because it introduces the whole reason as to why they're being affected by Freddy very late on in the movie. So all of these kids that are being attacked by Freddy are the final children of the Elm Street children. Right. Yes. But they only get that until it was like
Nancy really comes.
Right.
Yeah, until Nancy comes up. And I think that's where it feels a bit tacked on, in the sense that you're like, oh shit, we have to kind of bring this back to Elm Street somehow. Well, it could have been about, I mean, I suppose because they had some old characters in it. They had Nancy, the original final girl, and they had her father, who I think was the original. I think he was in the original movie as well. The police chief that was part of the original killing of Freddie, and then the denying of it and all of that sort of stuff, which led to the problems in the first place. But yeah, so there's a few. Yeah, so it's obviously Patricia Arquette is like, night night mum, all right, and she goes to bed willingly after trying to stay awake till 1:30. Then she just goes, oh okay, I'll just go to bed then. So she wakes up as though she's, in normal times, but she's actually asleep, and she goes back to, she gets kind of transported. She wakes up and she's in Elm Street proper at the house, which we find out is that's the doll's house she's been building. It's the Elm Street house, and she keeps kind of doing that. She sort of draws it later on, and she can't stop drawing it, so it's almost as though she's kind of like she's drawn back to it. So she goes in, and it's the usual. There's a little girl on a bicycle, a la The Shining. Come inside. Oh, Freddie's home, and all this kind of stuff. And they suddenly again goes down to a horrible basement with a furnace. You're like, yeah, as if you would go down there, even in your dream. You're like, yeah, I think I'm good. She's down there, and then suddenly they hear Freddie come back. Freddie jumps out, does he, at that point? But she basically picks up the girl. This is quite good. She picks up the girl and starts running. But there's a point in that running away bit where it immediately turns into a doll. You can sort of see the girl is like properly a little girl that she picked up, and then about the next shot is like she's running, and it's like a rag doll, like just go da 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 da. So. I mean, that's good that no children were harmed in the production, but it was quite obvious. So she thinks she wakes up.
Is it Kristen or is it Kirsten? Because she gets called two different names several times, and no one actually has the. I think it's Kirsten. But
for me, it's Kirsten. The mother's a bloody bitch, so she'd probably call her the wrong name just on purpose, to be honest with you. But as far as I was aware, it was Kirsten. Yeah.
I'm gonna bring up some clips. I've not got the clips, but I will splice them in because they're a definite. Like, I don't think they've got the name nailed down, and they just
definitely flash that up just now. Then, but the mother is a typical Elm Street parent in that they're kind of absent really, and they seem to not get. So the whole point is that by the end of the dream, she's been psyched out. She thinks it's not a dream anymore. She wakes up, she goes to the bathroom, and then suddenly Freddie appears in the mirror and goes chit with his little blade hands through grabs her hand on the pipe. But then when she wakes up and the mother actually comes in, it turns out she's razor bladed her wrists, and so they think it's a suicide attempt. So she gets carted in to the hospital, but then gets taken up to the psychiatric unit, which is the nicest psychiatric unit on the outside. That I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. So she gets put in there, but she freaks out because they want to sedate her. and she doesn't want to go to sleep. So this is enter Larry Fishburne in his love beads as the orderly who's trying to kind of calm her down and convince her that she needs to be sedated.
Doesn't work. And then
not.
Nancy, who is the original sort of heroine for the.
Yes, that's Heather Langenkamp. Now, in the original, because I suppose she's young, I always thought she's pretty good. And actually, in the final film that Wes Craven made, which is the meta one, where it's like the real life Heather Langenkamp, and it's like Freddie's come out into the real world, which is I think what he always wanted to do. She's not bad in that either. But this one, and so I thought, she was okay in this. She is not good in this movie. It's kind of like she's on a delay. It's a bit like when you have a second delay in like broadcasting or whatever. She's sort of like, it's very, when she's in a scene with somebody, it's very clear that she's either, when they're doing the two shot, like she's kind of acting to the camera as opposed to the person. There's no real chemistry apart from Dr. Gordon, who's clearly wanting to get into her pants all the way through.
It's a bit wishy-washy. There doesn't really seem to be a main protagonist. It kind of splits between three, which is, as you said, Neil, our doctor,
Neil Gordon,
Nancy, and Kirsten.
Yeah,
but Kirsten's a very weak character. She's not really ever any, main focus of the movie, apart from just being, I suppose she's the viewer kind of going through this, but she never really takes charge of anything. And
no, I would agree. No, apart from really obviously the screaming, which is constant and
gymnastics
and the gymnastics. And I guess she's the one that has the power to pull people into her dream in order so they can actually be together.
It happens like twice.
I know, but she can do it. I know, but she can do it.
You would think that she's like, right, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to call you all into the dream. We're going to get Freddie. Never happens. They do the hypnosis thing a couple of times.
Well,
but that's not really her. It's not her that's doing it. It's just the fact that it's almost like a group dream. So very odd. It reminded me, or at least the title reminded me. Remember there was a kids' TV cartoon show where by day they would all be like schoolmates, and by night they would go to sleep and they would go heroes, and it would be like a complete alternate reality. And that's what I thought it was going to be like.
Vaguely.
It really wasn't.
No.
It really wasn't, because it was really only the
well,
end.
I think the thing is as well is that they never really, you get introduced to all the characters kind of in the first like 20-25 minutes and you can kind of, as you said, start drawing stakes on who's going to get killed first and who's going to survive. But they never really seem to, apart from in twos, they never really interact all together apart from the group scenes, in which they don't really seem like they care enough about each other in order to bandy up together to fight it. It kind of, so the twos are, there's the sleepwalker, and is it Kincaid, the guy that is strong. He's the kind of tough kid from the streets and all that jazz.
We've got this is my table. So we've got Jennifer, who wants to be an actress and watches the TV.
I put it wants to be.
I thought she was number one. I thought she was going to be number one.
No, that's the best thing. But I said Jennifer wants to be in TV but has a face for radio. So I was like, yeah, you're never getting on TV, babe. Sorry.
We have Kincaid, who is the comic relief / black guy / kind of tough guy.
Well, he's kind of like the one that basically speaks sense. Like, I'm not fucking doing that. You can piss off. Like, yeah, but he's still, Does he survive? Yeah, he does survive. Does he?
So he does, but I said he would die, but later on. So I was almost right. I thought, he's going to die in the last kind of scene.
The tragic hero's death, pushing through the walls. Yeah. So there's also Philip, who's the habitual sleepwalker. And immediately when they said, he likes to sleepwalk, you have to leave him alone. I was like, yeah, he's fucked, because they're going to just think he's sleepwalking.
I had him down for second, but he was obviously number one on the list.
And then there's Tyron, who's a recovering drug addict kind of girl, who I liked. No, we'll talk about
cringe-worthy scene.
I know. But
Not even she could do it with a straight face.
I
was
know.
like,
Well, I think the hair didn't help and the outfit was not good. But she was in a different movie. But there wasn't, I don't know if you noticed with Tyron, there was a sort of subplot that didn't go anywhere, which was the other orderly, not Max.
Yes.
This other creepy motherfucker was like, I've got the keys to heaven, baby. Like, basically, if you shag me, I'll open up the drug cabinet. And she was like, no, I don't do that anymore. And it was like, nothing. He never got his comeuppance. You never really saw him again. He was there for a couple of scenes, and he just kind of like faded into the background. But I thought that was that would have been quite interesting, or that he could have inadvertently been killed by Freddie as some kind of avenging justice. It would have been good, but not happening
on the cut room floor. I think that one we've got.
Yeah. And
Max,
Joey,
who is
Max
in the wheelchair.
Yes,
and
the wizard.
I had him dead.
The Wiz. Yeah, the Wiz. Oh,
I had him third. I had Joey the mute, who I thought would live, because I was like, nah, they're not going to kill the mute off. He's just a sacrificial lamb. That one.
He probably had
he's almost like the child of the piece. They're not going to kill him.
He had the most kind of traumatic encounters with Freddie. Well, that wouldn't have been fun. Well, I mean, he got a little bit of fun, and then he's
probably not going to have sex again.
Not with anybody in the nursing industry, definitely not. But interestingly, because I knew what happened to him because I'd watched it before, but I hadn't picked up the first bit when he sort of sees the nurse walking and he clearly fancies her, because I hadn't picked up on that at all. I was just like, he's just clearly like a wee boy who thinks he's going to get action, but actually he'd obviously quite like seen her from afar and quite liked her, which is what obviously Freddie plays into later on. So yeah, that's all of the kind of the crew. There's also a Nurse Ratched kind of character in the woman doctor. I don't know what her name is, I can't remember, but boy is she a bitch. She's the one that basically doesn't believe Nancy. Nancy's this psychotherapy intern, and she's saying, I'm on this drug called Hypnosil, and basically means that I can sleep without dreams, so therefore Freddie can't get me, and it's all good. And so she befriends, Dr. Gordon takes one look at her when she gets introduced to the gang and goes, I fancy me a bit of that. And also the other thing was, I was like, this is only like about 4 years, supposedly 4 years after the original. Now, my understanding was she was about 14, 15 in that movie. So she's done quite well to be a psychotherapy intern at this point. I was like, yeah, you've done super
illegal,
well.
Baby.
So, like the Matt Gates defense. But yeah, so Dr. Gordon fancies the pants off of her and wants to kind of get to know her better. And there's a whole little bit where they have a seat outside after the first kind of introduction to all the characters, and she drops her bag, and he sort of he just has a good old gander at her medication, which drops out of her bag, which is Hypnosil, and then he goes home to his very chunky giant supercomputer, and which I was like, oh my god, that's like, there were computers, I have experienced computers like that, and looks up Hypnosil. I was like, that's quite good. I wouldn't have thought the internet would have done that at that point, but hey ho. So that's people all introduced, and it's then who's going to the countdown to the first person dying. Really,
it takes
a while.
It took quite 30 minutes. It took really for the first death. I thought, man, he's got to get going here. He's got a group of young people he's got to get through. He's got to really move it. So
but he does.
Was quite gruesome with the tendons. So basically, he kind of uses Philip as a puppet,
a marionette.
To chuck him off the top of a tall building.
And I have to say, I thought that the animation of the little marionette, the faceless marionette turning into Freddie and jumping off and then growing, and then him using his which is pretty gross. The tendon bit is grim, but that was really good. And I liked the whole thing of him looking like he was sleepwalking. So Kincaid's asleep in the same room, but he's like, you're sleepwalking, good night kind of thing. And that there's this sort of like the reality of what he's experiencing, and then the actual what people are seeing, just he looks like he's sleepwalking. And I thought the effects generally were quite good. The superimposition of like Freddie on the bell tower kind of thing that he jumps off. I actually like, that's the bit that gives me hope, because there's the bit when the other kids are doing like taking it in turns to keep watch over the other when they're sleeping. So one of them is up and sees Philip on the bell tower and starts shouting and tries to get help. And I know that Max in the wheelchair? Max can't walk, but Joey can't speak. So he's like, Joey, go and get help. And Joey can't speak. So the nurse is like, what's wrong? And he's like, and he just picks up a lunch tray and like goes, doof, like batters all the door, obviously to wake them up. So they all stand at their window, they've broken the window, trying to wake him up.
I mean, if you're a mute, surely you would just say pad, like, or bring a pad and pen with you.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Oh, come home, quick. Anyway, so he's no use to ornaments. They all basically shout, but poor old Philip can't wake up. He's too far away, and he seemingly jumps to his death in an apparent suicide. But they all know that it's because Freddie's got hold of him and has chucked him off the building, which is not very nice.
Yeah,
not very nice
look,
at all.
We had to go to the first. He doesn't even get a funeral. Actually, most of them get funerals. So after a death, it's a funeral. Then
Yeah.
But it just goes straight into group therapy where they're all fighting. The nurses saying, No, he just gave up. He committed suicide. There was nothing sinister about it, even though he transported himself through a locked door. That's fine. He somehow got up there without knocking through the door. So
I think also
that detail.
There's a few other things that go on. I think around this time as well, she's been committed to the unit, and she doesn't want to go to sleep. So she's kind of bonded a bit with Nancy, who kind of is like, oh, what's all this about? She started to sort of figure out things are a little bit wrong. Plus, I think she's gone to visit the mother, Nancy has, and she's seen the house that she's built and realised that it's the Elm Street house. So she goes back, and this is the bit when I think Kirsten falls asleep again in the hospital unit, and that's when Freddie comes and tries to eat her. That's the Freddie worm part underneath the rug, and that's when she first pulls Nancy into the dream, and Nancy helps kind of get out. So we've already established that she can pull Nancy into the dream. They're sort of psychically connected, but Philip, tough shit, Philip, it's too early in the film for you to be saved. So you're the first sacrificial lamb that's going to get chucked off the building. And then she also says, like, she's like, when did you know that you could pull people?
If Nancy had the powers and she had jumped into the dreams and had shown them how to develop their own powers and become dream warriors to defeat Freddy, that would have been the Power Rangers formula to do this movie, but it did not happen.
Go. Yeah, no, it didn't really, and I think there's some missed opportunities generally for the whole kind of the ganging up. They all got separated far too easily, and it was kind of just didn't, their powers were seemingly useless when they were not used together. So the other thing to mention around this time as well is there is a nun that somehow turns up in the background, which is it's quite funny. So Dr. Gordon is the only one, the guy is the only one that can see this nun, and you're like, oh, this isn't half creepy, that's a bit creepy.
Time out. Whoa. You've missed the reason why they're at the funeral, and this is Jennifer's death in front of the TV. So
no, but there's before I know that, but there's a flash of the nun way early.
Is there?
He doesn't speak yet. He doesn't speak to her. But
right,
there's a bit with and he's like, who's that? And then she suddenly disappears, and it's like, ooh, but he's the only one at any point during the movie that has interactions with her. No one else can see her, obviously, because she's not alive anymore. So he sees the nun. So basically, Philip is not alive anymore. So that was quite gruesome. And then that's when they have the kind of group session, and Kincaid is like, fuck this, I'm not. He's the voice of reason. He's just like, I don't want. And he doesn't really get much of a go, I don't think. Like, you don't get much of him going into his dreams, I suppose, because he sort of gets to the end as such. But he doesn't really get much to do other than to be quite cynical, and then obviously have a hissy fit at some point when the horrible Nurse Ratched character wants to kind of, sedate them and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a weird one. This is an ensemble cast, obviously, but there's just no real character development for anybody, I would say.
No, not really.
Barb, maybe
even Kristen.
Maybe
Neil. Yeah, a little bit, because I suppose he goes on his own little adventure. He goes on his own little adventure. Yeah, but you're right.
Kind of goes from a skeptic, and then Nancy convinces him through the power of sex to believe.
They sleep together. She doesn't give it away. She's Nancy. The thing is, sex equals death, so don't do that. But I suppose then after the group session where Kincaid's like, you're not sedating me, then basically the next one is, you're absolutely right, it's Jennifer at the television. And is this where you're saying that Larry Fishburne is responsible for a girl's death? I'm guessing.
Totally is, because basically she's watching TV to stay awake, and Larry Fishburne, the owner,
Love
comes and
beats.
goes, right, need to switch it off, you need to go to bed. You know the new protocols, and she kind of like sweet talks him a little bit. She's like, oh, I need to watch this and this sort of stuff. So he kind of lets her stay, and you know what's going to happen. She falls asleep, and Freddie eventually turns up in the interview, and then turns into the with
Dick Cavett. So a little bit of trivia, because I didn't really know Dick Cavett, but Dick Cavett's sort of like the kind of there's Johnny Carson and Dick Cavett, so it's kind of like they were sort of similar talk show hosts. There was a few of them at the time, and he was the other one. So Dick Cavett was cast, and they let him choose who he'd like to be his guest on this filmed bit, right? And he said, it can only be Zsa Zsa Gabor. Now, it turned out that apparently Zsa Zsa Gabor had no fucking clue what Freddy Krueger was or Nightmare on Elm Street. So apparently, when he so Dick Cavett's chatting to her, and Zsa Zsa goes, yes, darling, oh, it's wonderful, you've got to be trained and all this. That when they brought Freddy, like Robert Englund, in to like stab, like, you know, go to stab her,
yeah,
she had no idea what the fuck was going on, apparently. And she was quite like, it said that she completely like she didn't like take a script or anything. They were just like, I'll sit and talk, darling. And then she's like, oh, there's somebody going to kill me. So apparently that was the
bizarre. Bizarre that she was in the front headline names of the movie. Surely she should be at the back, like at a movie.
She should, but I think maybe that's because they thought, oh well, pull in some older crowd, you know, who liked Zsa Zsa Gabor at the time. I guess she was still was she in Green Acres? Green Acres, is that the one? I like the city. Is that Zsa Zsa Gabor? I forget, but anyway, yeah. So she's only in it for a brief second. So as soon as that happens, Jennifer realizes things. Also, can I just say, the bit with the burning with the cigarettes is unnecessary and quite horrible. So she's digging around in the ashtray for the dog ends, and I thought, oh, she's just going to smoke a cigarette to keep herself awake. And then she just goes, she takes one puff, and then she digs it into her arm, which is quite gruesome. It's horrible. And I was like, oh no. So she realizes then, oh shit, I'm asleep. But she doesn't really get it enough to not go up to the television and try and turn it to another channel. She goes up to the television, and what happens? Freddy happens. And this is arguably
prime time, bitch.
Welcome to prime time, bitch. It's a great line. And the effects of it, I mean, it's quite an iconic scene. Like, even if you've not watched this movie, it's quite well known. But the whole thing with the head coming out of the top of the television looking like a condom that's burst, and the sort of arms that come out of the side, and also, like, obviously, and then it smashes her face into the television and electrocutes her. But then Lawrence Fishburne's kind of like hanging around outside the room, doesn't hear any kind of struggle or scream, and then suddenly comes in and he's buried in the TV, but the TV's halfway up the wall. So how the hell would she have done that on a, you know, at that point, you're like, somebody's doing something to these kids. Not, oh, she's committed suicide by diving head first into a television. I mean, it's not physically possible for her to have done it.
A horrific scene, but I'm sure that if it was in real life, you would ask that very question. Like, how the fuck?
What did you get? But there's no question. It's basically no. And this is when they start to do is that when they then jump into the whole, Jennifer's funeral is where Dr. Gordon talks to the nun. And this is about Freddy Krueger's kind of like birth story. Because at the moment, the time, obviously, he's been killed by all the parents, which is why he comes back and takes his revenge on the children. But his remains are nowhere to be found at this point. And so the nun talks a lot about how he's an unquiet spirit and he needs to be laid to rest on hallowed ground. So the adventure for Dr. Gordon is to try and somehow get hold of Freddy Krueger's actual remains and get them like onto holy ground or douse them in holy water, which apparently is the same thing. So and the nun explains a little bit of the kind of the beginning of the backstory, but not quite all of it yet, but some of it. But not quite. She does re-emerge, and then later, she just suddenly disappears, and you're thinking, okay, there's obviously something a little bit amiss about this nun. And then the next scene, you go into group therapy. An unsupervised group therapy with Nancy, telling them the actual what's going on, who the guy is. And this is the beginning of them actually realizing that they've got something to do with the Elm Street sort of vibe, and they're the last remaining Elm Street children.
So they all explain everything. I think at that stage, the Dream Warriors idea kind of emerges, but you're in there. You're probably past halfway through the movie at this point. And I think at this stage, they all explain their strengths. Do they not?
Yeah, Kincaid realizes he's really strong, and Kirsten realizes she can do double backflips and shit, which is quite funny. And I wonder, I'm sure it wasn't Patricia Arquette that was doing them. And the you know, the kind of desk organizer thing, you know, the what's it called? It's not the cat's cradle, but it's like it's a, you know, the balls suddenly float into. You don't know whether it's real or not, and then the balls suddenly float into the air. But at this point, no one's thought to say, oh, I wonder where Joey's got to, because Joey's nowhere to be seen, and he's gone off on a little explore on his own, which is not good for him.
Joey's going to get some ass. That's what Joey's going to get. But before that scene comes up, we get Taryn's power and what happens to her. So everyone else is like, oh, I get really strong.
I can do gymnastics. Wizard. Yeah. The wizard.
Gymnastics.
Yeah.
And she gets, I'm beautiful and bad. And you're like, oh.
With the knives. With the blades, like, and the kind of mohawk and the sort of leather thing. I don't really get, I think they kind of ran out of ideas on what powers they could give her, to be honest. But again, you know, so obviously she's a recovering drug addict, which comes to the fore in the manner of her death. But so she's like a street tough with the leather jacket and the mohawk and the knives that pop out of her sleeves, kind of thing. Very machete, but yeah. So
I would say
tragic.
Probably the worst. Yeah.
It is. It's really bad. I got some trivia on that one as well when we get to it. But let's go back to old Joey Chops, who is going. He's gone out into the corridor, and suddenly the nurse that he's fancied from afar is very interested in him and wants to take him to the room. Now, at this point, I just think clearly this is just to get some tits in the movie. There was no T and A. So she basically drags him into a room. Go on.
No, I was about to say perhaps they thought that they were going to get the TNA from Nancy and Neil, but it was not.
Cop blocked at every turn. That nun turns up every time he wants to get a little bit of post-funeral sex. It's not going to happen.
This is true. So it's actually quite a disturbing scene. So the nurse gets naked and I think kisses Joey, and then you realise something is wrong, is amiss.
What they had done, apparently, I read into this, they had originally decided that they were going to have her turn into like a she-Freddy, right, with knives for fingers and stuff. But they thought it looked too weird with the tits on it and Freddy's face and stuff. So they decided not to do that, and that actually he would just turn into, like, she would kiss him, and then it would be basically like she would just turn into Freddy and then trap him. So he's basically, poor old Joey is tied to the bed, spread eagle to the bed, like over a pit of fire, and he can't shout for help because he's mute. So basically, he's stuck in this state, in sort of purgatory, if you will. But Freddie doesn't kill him. He sort of just keeps him there as sort of bait, I guess, to like say, "Come get me," kind of later on. I think Nancy,
for a hell of a long time.
Which is
so they all realize they're in a dream. I think they get attacked by Freddie, but they manage to get out of it. But Joey is in a deep coma, and at this stage, the doctor.
I've got the name. Dr. Sims. Dr.
Whatever.
Sims is the woman. So the reason why they all wake up, apart from Joey, who's in a coma ostensibly, but he's been tortured, is because she opens the door and finds them all asleep on the floor, and it wakes them up. So basically, Dr. Sims is like, "What the fuck's going on here?" So now that Joey because of the unorthodox methods, Joey's in a coma. So basically, Dr. Gordon and Nancy get relieved of duty because.
Fired.
But they're not really, because they've still got access to everything really that they need, even though, and this, anyway. So basically, they have to leave, and Dr. Sims is like, "Fuck this, guys! You're all getting sedated, and you're not getting hit in the cell, and you can fucking suffer in your jocks." And Kirsten goes mental, and I think gets sedated and put in the isolation chamber at that point.
I say, not Kincaid. Does Kincaid not freak out and go, "No way, man! I ain't going to sleep and all that sort of stuff.
I think that was a little bit before. It all blends into bloody one, because at some point, so basically they I think the next scene is more about the nun and about the origins of Freddie. And so the Dr. Gordon has been relieved of duties, but as he's leaving, he sees the nun at the top of the bell tower. And so he decides, let's go and see if we can have a chat with this woman. He goes to the bottom of the bell tower, which is locked, and he just picks up a tiny stone and just goes, doosh, and then it suddenly opens. I was like, okay, so he breaks the lock off. He goes up to the top of the bell tower and he finds the nun, and they have this sort of discussion about the origin of Freddie and how it's happened. So this bell tower was originally a place where they stuffed all the absolute maniacs that were untreatable. And somehow a woman who was on the staff had accidentally been locked in there over the weekend and hidden by the inmates and raped hundreds and hundreds of times. And so when she came out, she was not only like traumatized, but she was also pregnant with the son of 100 maniacs, which is Freddy Krueger. And then the nun at this point sort of just disappears again. And at that point I thought, oh no, he's going to get locked in. I couldn't remember what happened to him, but he doesn't. He manages, but he just can't find her again. So he now has got a bit more of the backstory of Freddie, and that they need to get hold of the bones of Freddy Krueger in order to get this to stop. So that's when Nancy and him meet up and go and find her father, who is a police officer and clearly estranged from Nancy because of what's happened in the original movie.
Yeah, it's a weird scene. Obviously, they go to a bar to accost the father, and the relationship is fairly rocky. So he doesn't want to play ball with them, and they kind of go their separate ways. Nancy goes back, I think, to help the kids.
Well, they get
fight
paged.
Freddie, and
they
then
get paged
Neil,
from
the
the
doctor.
hospital. Yeah. They get.
He goes back, and he goes, "Well, you might not love Nancy, but I do. And if you've got anything about you, you're coming with me." And
somehow he manages to convince
to go
him
with
to
him
go,
to find the bones.
which the father clearly knows. He's been the ringleader, I think, so he clearly knows where the bones are hidden. So he's like goes to that, and it leads to a really good scene. But at meantime, they've all the kids who are awake have paged the Dr. Gordon, and said, look, they've sedated Kirsten. She's in isolation. We don't know what's going to happen, but she can't stay awake, so she's going to get killed. So Nancy goes back up to try and get into a group hypnosis session again to get help to Kirsten. So the father and Dr. Gordon go off on their mission, and Nancy goes off on hers. Now, this is where I think this is Larry Fishburne's like final scene, because you don't really see him again, I think, after this. But he basically is trying to say, no, you can't really go and see her, and you can't do this. And then suddenly he just goes, yeah, all right, again. And she's like, I need to say goodbye. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll let you speak to them all unsupervised again, and then leave you in a room for ages and ages. I mean, like, surely he would be like, right, say goodbye. All right, then, right, on you go. Anyway, he doesn't. They manage to get back together, and they go into their group. Oh, the one thing I was going to say, did you not find the metronome really soothing? I loved it. Yeah. I was like, you could just play with that for a little bit. I was really nice with the light in the middle, and I was very entranced by that. But anyway, so they go into the dream. They manage to find her in her padded sort of isolation cell in the dream as such. And this is the kind of beginning of the end, if you will. But yeah, so yeah. Also, the other thing, the bit with them. This is where I thought that the girl that plays Nancy was because they have a scene, her and Lawrence Fishburne, and you think Lawrence Fishburne, really good actor, and it just showed you how bad she was, because he was not bad, he was quite natural, and she was just like, no, but we have to go in, I need to save the children, and it was like almost as though she was acting to nobody. It was really strange. Anyway, so they're in the dream, and this is where they start getting separated from each other.
Yes.
Which is the downfall of some of them.
The Dream Warriors are split up, as you said. So Tyron gets. It is quite a memorable scene, that with the jabs, that with the needles.
Well, first we have old Will in the wheelchair of pain, that chases him down. So that's the first one. So they get separated, and most of them can't find one another, but Will is the first one to go. So he is the boy in the wheelchair in real life.
His name's Max.
Is it? Okay, yes. Well, maybe. All right, sorry. Well, Max then. I don't know why I put Will. Well, anyway, so Max in the wheelchair, but he's first. So then that's when he pulls out his wizard powers for the second time, which are, you think, oh, it's going to work. And you're like, no, it's not going to work. So he meets his end fairly quickly, doesn't he? He doesn't really last very long.
It's a bit of a rubbish death. He kind of just gets stabbed in the chest with the claws, and that's about it. It's no kind of memorable or link to it. Would have been better with a wheelchair death, like the Iron Maiden wheelchair. If he got killed in that, I'd go.
I thought, does he get pushed onto it or something? Because they probably got. You're absolutely right. Tyron was first. I just hadn't put too much about it. But yeah, so Will gets killed just the ordinary way, basically pulled up, like taken up by his neck, and then like. Yeah. But Tyron's death is particularly grim. And I've got a little bit of trivia about that one. So she obviously, so the scene is she gets separated from everybody as well, just like Max does. But basically, she ends up on a sort of back alleyway where it's kind of dodgy. Clearly, that's where she's gone in the past to score drugs. And there's a kind of drifter kind of person that kind of walks past, and she sort of she's got her little knives ready, and it's not Freddie, and then suddenly Freddie's there. And it's all about kind of, surely don't you, like you're just a loser, and, like take drugs and da-da-da. And she tries to have a little rumble. I put Tyron has a tango with Freddie, which doesn't come good. So she has a little bit of an altercation. You think maybe she might get somewhere. She doesn't. And then his blades turn into needles. And that's the horrible thing as well. The track marks on her arms all start going maybe like they're desperate for the drugs. It's really horrible. And then basically what happens is he sticks instead of like stabbing her and slash, he just sticks all the needles into her arms, and like she just like it. But apparently what the original thing was that she was going to almost go like a sort of Indiana Jones, like the when the Nazi drinks the Holy Grail. Yeah, like she was going to do that, but apparently they found it so disturbing that really they just did the kind of special effects on the face to see it sort of whizzing a bit, and then she sort of dies. But they sort of cut away quite quickly, and I think that's because the original kind of special effect apparently was so traumatizing to everybody on film that they thought, no, we can't show this. So I'd love to see what it was, but apparently it was pretty gross. It's a horrible death, and it's a shame because actually she was quite feisty, and I would have had her survive, to be honest, but maybe I would have had her survive over Kirsten.
When did I have her dying? So Tyron dead last. So I thought she was going to die last. And in fact, I think that's accurate. No, wait, no, she doesn't die last. No,
not quite last.
There is one more second. But yeah, so I didn't think she was going to die because obviously drug users will always die in these movies. Come on, there has to be a moral code to this. And I thought Kincaid would definitely die. Kincaid never dies, right?
No, because Kincaid finds Kirsten and Nancy. That's the other thing. The bit then, Kirsten and Nancy do find each other, and they're like, they're so happy. It's like, no, but you're about to get killed, so don't be too happy. And then suddenly the wall moves, and you think it's Freddie, but actually it's Kincaid punching through the wall. So the three of them find each other, and then this like magical furnace door comes into the room, and it's like, oh yeah, let's go in there. That sounds like a good plan. And then it cuts back, so they go down, but you don't see what happens yet. But then it cuts to Dr. Gordon and the policeman father, and their quest in the junkyard, which is where they've hidden the bones of Freddie. And yes, so basically it's kind of like connected to Freddie in like the real life. So if something happens to his bones, then he can feel it within the dream, etc. So the two things are happening at once as they're sort of like finding the bones, and then they're going down the stairs. They find Joey, who's fucking spread eagled across the pit of fire, and they try and it doesn't look good really at that point for them all, because it looks as though Freddie's got the make of them.
The bone scene in the real world I thought was quite good with the stop motion. It reminded me of
Evil Dead.
Army of Darkness, Evil Dead sort of thing. But I thought again, pretty good use of effects. Quite liked it. I thought
apparently they used the similar scene in the next movie, which I haven't seen, so I couldn't tell you. But apparently they liked it so much that they used the same set and they used the same setup in some way in the next movie because it was so good. And people have said, "Oh, that's quite a well regarded scene," and it is quite good. It is good. It's quite creepy. The father obviously meets his end with the skeleton pushing him onto some kind of like sticky out bit of junk. But I think it's well deserved, to be honest, because he's a bit of a plum. But it doesn't look like it's going very well for the people down in the dungeon with Joey trying to free him at that point, because they're fiddling about with his bones in the real world, he gets sucked out to go and try and defend them, if you will. So it gives them a little bit of time to get Joey up and away, and a little bit of respite before he comes back. But obviously the end of the scene with Dr. Gordon is that he's basically knocked out and he's been buried alive. So again, very Evil Dead, Army of Darkness vibes in that, very much. And quite funny. The skeleton was kind of like quite the way that the skeletons are in the Army of Darkness. That was quite good. And then he pops back. And I think, is this when they're in the Hall of Mirrors at this point, I think?
Yeah, they go to Mirror World, or at least everyone's getting dragged into Mirror World. And you think, I don't know where that's going to end up.
Again, quite good special effects again for the time. Not bad for the 80s, I thought.
Yeah, it's a strange one. You would think that would be computer generated, but they must have probably had a filming technique to do the filters almost between the mirror.
Yeah, it's just when they pass through, they sort of see. Yeah, shade. It was good, I thought.
Aye. No,
but then this is when the mouse that roared. Yeah, and he suddenly goes, no.
Yeah, so.
And he manages to smash all the mirrors, and everybody gets basically fucking shot through like a cannonball into the Hall of Mirrors again. And it's the sort of final kind of encounter, the final battle with Freddie.
You get some weird things. The dad turns up in the dream, but it's a ruse. It's actually Freddie, and Nancy kind of gets caught, and you think, oh, is Nancy gonna save the day? Is she gonna get killed? And it's quite
kind of does both.
Abrupt, really.
Yeah, well, basically, she goes to hug her father because the father's like, I'm passing over to the other side. I just wanted to come and speak to you and tell you I love you, and I'm so sorry. It's like, come on, bitch, you're in Freddie's dream. And then obviously it turns out it's Freddie who stabs her with his glove, and is about to kill Kirsten. But then she manages in her death throes to stand up, take his glove, and sort of turn it in on himself and stab him. And then I think that's when Dr. Gordon wakes up and manages to douse the bones with some holy water. Oh, that's the other thing. We forgot that whole bit when he goes into the church and steals the holy water in the beer bottle or the whiskey bottle, and also takes the cross, and the guy goes, excuse me, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, I just need this. Here's my driver's license. I'll be back. It's like, all right. Theft from as if they're going to go, yeah, sure, son, you just give me your driver's license and I'll just hold on to it. But anyway, so at that point the holy water does its trick, and you think maybe Nancy will survive, but it cuts to funeral.
No. The funeral, you see the nun very briefly.
For the last time.
Dr. Gordon runs over to see if he can actually catch her and speak to her again. This is at Nancy's funeral, so Nancy's dead. I presume that.
Well, Kincaid and Kirsten are all alive.
Max,
they're dead.
There's two survivors, but it ends very abruptly. Again, this is a total trope.
We've had this similar kind of thing with a few of these movies. Basically, the only thing that happens is, so he figures out when the nun disappears, he's at the grave of her, realizes she's a ghost, but then underneath the Sister Mary, whatever it is, turns out she's Amanda Krueger. So she was the girl that was trapped in the bell tower with the 100 maniacs. So she's obviously trying to right the wrong, if you will, of Freddie. And then the last scene is basically, now this is the one thing, right? So obviously he's taken, so this is Dr. Gordon's house. He's going to bed, and he's taken the Malaysian dream catcher that Nancy had in her house when he was trying to shag her. So he's obviously taken that as a memento because that's on the side. And then the house that Kirsten's been building out of lollipop sticks is sitting on the side. Why he would keep that, I've got no clue. I didn't even think they took it from the mother's house. But anyway, so it's there. So as he goes to sleep, the light in that there's a light in the house which didn't have electricity last time. Like the light in the house turns on and it's like do do do, so he's not really dead, which basically built it up for another sequel. And that's the end. So all I can say is I'm very sorry because this one didn't stand up to the smell test.
It was not violent enough to be. There was a couple of memorable scenes, and Larry Fishburne, I think, helped it along the way because he's got a bit of charisma. But yeah, it was an odd movie. It very much felt like it was still a good enough movie to be within the franchise, but it seemed to be that it was on the decline. I think probably from the first two movies, it probably was the beginning of any quality in that franchise. And I would imagine that 4 and 5 diminished significantly from those movies.
4 I've not seen, and 5 is not good. But 6, which I think is the kind of meta one, is actually quite interesting, and it's late enough that the special effects are like the imagination is there always, but the actual special effects have sort of caught up with the, it looks quite good. And the premise is quite interesting, that it's actually Freddie in the real world and that the scripts have sort of brought him to life, and it's quite interesting concept. But yeah, I would agree. I guess it's the one that's got kind of quite notable people that have got careers today. And with Patricia Arquette's performance, you do wonder why she has a career today, because based on that performance, she wouldn't have picked it, to be honest. But I have to apologise. I think probably what I had focused on was the iconic nature of a couple of the scenes with the TV, and I guess the needles one is quite iconic. And the fact that Lawrence Fishburne's in it. And, you sort of think, also something to note, remember I was speaking a while back when we were on this about films that I've been watching throughout lockdown, and we were speaking about Brian De Palma movies, and I'd watched a lot because we obviously had John Travolta's delightful rubbish movie that we watched a while back. And I was talking, like there's a couple of different ones, but Body Double is the Brian De Palma movie that I want. The guy that is Dr. Gordon, the sleazy doctor who's trying to get away with that, he's the main character in Body Double. Now, he basically plays the identical, basically he's the same guy, he's just wanting a shag. I mean, that's basically what it is. Body Double is the one, it's like to do with the porn industry, etc., and it's got, what's her name, Melanie Griffiths is in it, and so he's just constantly chasing after her to get sex. It's quite good. That's really gruesome. But he is the main protagonist in that movie. And I only realised it. I was like, I recognise that guy. He's kind of sleazy and a bit desperate and kind of, it's totally him. So but apart from that, he didn't have much of a career after that, I don't think. Like, he's in stuff, but nothing notable. But yeah, so I apologise for this one. I think I would say I got about halfway through and I got bored of writing my notes. I didn't have anything funny to say about it. I think
it was middle of the road kind of horror. I don't think it was bad really in any way. And had you watched it at the cinema, you would have gone, that's probably what I would have expected from a Nightmare on Elm Street type movie. But it also wasn't good enough for you to go, oh, that was really memorable, or there was particular scenes that you would go on and that I'd watch that again. So yeah, it's probably too middle of the road in terms of a horror movie. So yeah, more of a hate watch in regards to it just being a little bit of a drag. Thankfully, nowhere near as bad as Eye for an Eye.
No, and also nice, and it was relatively short. I mean, although we've kind of talked about it at length today, it kicked on fairly quickly. Like immediately, we were almost at the end, and I was like, oh, we're in the final bit. I was like, that's gone quite quickly, but not because I was really enjoying it and kind of wrapped up in it, but more because I was just like, oh, good, it's at the end. So it's only an hour and a half. It's worth it for the couple of scenes that are funny, but I think you have to be a Freddy Krueger fan for it to be, and if you've not seen it, definitely check it out. But if you're new to the franchise, I wouldn't bother go with the first one and then watch Freddie and Jason for the laughs, because that's really where it's at.
I would agree. He becomes a bit of a parody of himself after so many sequels. But yeah, it's a weird one. Probably not enough splits in comparison to Bloodsport. No one doing splits.
No, Patricia Arquette would have tried them probably if you'd given her an option in her gymnastics routines. No, but no one can really stand up to the Van Damme's splits.
No testicle shots either. No one getting kicked or punched in the balls. So
interesting because with Bloodsport, I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it at all. on any level, and I was not looking forward to watching it. Whereas actually after I watched it, I had such a laugh throughout it because it was so cheesy that I really enjoyed. I was like, and I mean, if it came on again, I'd probably watch it again. Whereas this, I will not watch it again, probably ever, because I was like, I'm done with you. I watched you once and I quite enjoyed you. And then this time thinking I would enjoy you again, and I totally didn't. So yeah, my apologies on the choice. I thought if you hadn't watched it, I thought it was worth it for the scenes, but I think probably it's more on the hate watch than the love to hate.
Yeah, I would concur. But we move on. And I believe that it is my choice for the week. So I look for something. I don't know what I'm going to try to go with something that's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, as I usually try to. And I will. There's
a few good ones out at the moment, so it's worth having a bit of a trawl. There's a couple. Depends what genre you want to go with. I'm guessing, should we move away from horror? I have my choice lined up for the week after, and I promise you it's better. But what were you thinking?
Is it the one that you've got planned to be watching the DVD? Is it finished?
Yeah, I'll be sending that to you. Is it
as good as you thought it was going to be?
It's better. I mean, there's no end to the hilarity. I mean, really not. But we'll save that one for a couple of weeks' time, so you'll have to tune back in for that. But yeah, this week, have a little think, and we'll see what fun and frolics you come up with. But yeah, let's maybe pick. We'll try and pick one that's just maybe coming on to, or has come on to either Prime or Netflix, so that it's nice and easy for you to watch along. And maybe watch it with our commentary in your ears.
I quite like doing something that's fresh to you and I. Obviously, this one was fresh to me. Bloodsport was completely fresh to you. Yeah. So I always think it's good for one of us to have the perspective
of a newbie.
I've never watched this before, so I'm going to give it I'm going to take it from there. So, all right, let me have a look, and we will get something planned for.
I fancy a thriller, but see how you go. We'll see. A thriller of some description. I need to be thrilled. I'm so bored in lockdown.
Wow, we might go for because we did. Would you class? You do. What was it? Outbreak. Outbreak would be classed as a thriller.
Yeah, and that was enjoyable. Even on the third or fourth watch, I really still enjoyed it, even though it's ridiculous.
Goddamn, Dustin Hoffman keeps it going.
Goddamn nosy son of a bitch. Yeah, God love you, Donald Sutherland.
It can't be a levels. It can't be an eye for eye levels. It can't be that bad.
That was our. I think that was the pits, wasn't it? Really, so far in our watching journey, that was the nadir of that was definitely down at the depths, because not only was it ridiculous, and it was stupid. It didn't go anywhere. The only saving grace was poor old Brendan Fraser. Poor put upon.
God bless his soul.
God love him. I hope he gets his career back. There was a thing on Twitter a little while back trying to get him kind of boosted back up, where's he gone and what's happened, and quite sad. We spoke about it a little bit before, but I do think he was it was unsavable, that movie, but he was trying to be the saving grace of some kind of cult following. But God, it wasn't as bad as that. So we both got one. We both got one real stinker on our books. I think the rest have been pretty good. So I think we need to see if we can find a winner next week.
I would agree. All right.
But then 2 weeks' time, there's going to be a out of the ballpark winner coming your way. I tell you. Oh, yeah, I hope you've got a DVD. No
one's ever heard of it. I mean, this is ridiculous.
They have.
It's such a ridiculous concept, that movie, but I'm looking.
Well, we won't spoil what it is, but it's definitely worth a listen. Okay, so thanks very much, and I'm sorry again. Okay. Yeah.
And his Dream Warriors, not the finest hour of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Not scary, and also not a parody or really that funny, apart from Primetime Bitch, which was about the only redeeming quality within it. Pretty cool effects, but that's really just for someone that's really into that sort of stuff. Not one to recommend, and only for aficionados of the series. Catch you next time. Bye.